that bar.
That extra gear, that first 3 steps.
Huge strides in the performance.
That I might not be the player I am today.
All right, welcome to another episode of Behind the Gear, and today we are sitting with Jens Casten, and thank you very much for joining us today, Jens. And Jens is obviously a sports psychology coach who kind of helps athletes, I think business, I think you kind of cover the whole gamut as far as the mental side of whatever that performance is, whether it's business or work or athletes and different things like that. But you've got a cool background, and the one thing that I was impressed with is just your hockey background. And obviously we talk a lot about hockey on this podcast, but it's something too that, you know, when you are dealing with athletes and things like that, whether it's a skier or a hockey player or a volleyball player, doesn't matter. You've gone through that process of being a young athlete and then getting into being a professional athlete, kind of your career, and then now post-career. So how did all this start for you, I guess? Home, kind of where is home for you?
First of all, thank you for having me on the show. I greatly appreciate it. I'm born and raised German, and my upbringing was in a small ski town in Germany, 120 kilometers southeast of Hanover. I started playing hockey very late. I was 11 years old, and the reason for that is we didn't have a hockey rink. We had an outdoor rink that was only, it's all-time hockey. You know, you took a hose and sprayed it in the winter and waited till you have enough ice on there to skate. But when I was 11, they finally opened an indoor rink, and that's when I started playing organized hockey. And very quickly, that became a passion, almost an obsession. And I was on the ice more than I was anywhere else. And I started playing professional hockey when I was 16. So I was the youngest player in the league, and, being surrounded by grown-ups. The oldest player on our team back then was 42. I had to grow up very, very quickly. And I started off as a third-string goalie, and within 3 months, I was the starting goalie. And when I was 18, younger players came to me for advice, and that's when I started mentoring and guiding younger players. And it didn't stop there. It went from players to parents, and then I talked to coaches about how to work with young talent, and actually started way back then talking about mental game and mental strength. And it was very interesting because that was one of my challenges throughout my career, because I didn't have anyone to work with on my mental strength. And became my mental strength became an issue for me throughout my career.
No, it's interesting because, and I mean, being a goaltender too, you know, I'm not a goalie. I tried it a couple of times. I loved goaltending when I was young and wanted to be a goalie like most players, I think. But that's a position in itself that you need to have a lot of mental toughness, because you're the last line of defense. You let in a bad goal. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in your head. You're not sitting on the bench with the rest of the players saying, "Hey, no, don't worry about it. Hey, it's okay." You know, you'll get the odd tap on the pads, but for the most part, you're sitting there dealing with your own thoughts in your head in the crease. And it's definitely such a big part of sport in general. But definitely when you're talking about, you know, pitchers, or you're talking about goaltenders, people that are on their own kind of facing that game, it's definitely a big part of a player's success for sure.
Yeah, you know, we're talking hockey here, but in professional sports, it doesn't matter what kind of athlete you are. There's always performance pressure. And one of the things that happened to me, I had a very rough upbringing. My father was an abusive alcoholic, and I had my first anxiety attack when I was 6 years old, but was never diagnosed with anxiety until I was 43. So throughout my hockey career, I was dealing with anxiety, and nobody knew how to handle it. So I was pretty much labeled a hypochondriac because I had these panic attacks, and every time I got to a doctor, it was gone. And like I said, they said, "You have nothing. It's all in your head." And that puts you into a very lonely place, because you get to a point where you don't want to talk about it anymore because you're sick and tired of being labeled that there's nothing wrong with you. But in the back of your head, you know that there's definitely something going on. And for athletes, performance anxiety becomes more and more an issue, and we have the responsibility as trainers, as coaches, as parents, and as athletes to bring this to the forefront and start dealing with it.
Oh, for sure. No, I think that's huge. And I mean, for you having that, even kind of your own experiences, I think it obviously strengthens what you do now. One thing you mentioned earlier in kind of your story is you started late when you were 11, and I was the same. I started when I was 9, which, I'm in Canadian standards. I missed the boat. I was way, way too late to the game. Right. But I think for me personally, starting at 9, and this is more for parents out there that have their young kids maybe starting at 6 or 7 and feel, oh my God, I'm doing such a disservice to my child because they didn't start at 3 or 4, or she didn't begin early enough. I think when I was 9, I was stronger. I was a little bit more mentally, not tough, but I could pick things up a little bit quicker. I was more athletic, and I fell in love with it, probably like you, and spent hours and hours and hours at the rink. And I was the same as you, outdoor rinks from Northern Ontario. So we, flooded the rinks, shoveled the rinks, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I loved it, and I fell in love with it. And I kind of, it sounds like you did too. You kind of caught up to to that age group, and you caught up to your peers and started obviously surpassing them a little bit. But I think for, young kids that do love it, being able to get those opportunities to go to the outdoor rink or go on the ice or do that, and really feeding that fire, that hunger that you had for the game, obviously allowed you to propel into playing, at a higher level, which I think is obviously huge. And the fact that you played, I think, over 20 years of professional hockey, starting at 11, a lot of people be like, there's no way. And, here you are, obviously, proof of that. Now, going to what you said about kind of your upbringing and, and your father and things like that, looking back on it now, did that kind of strengthen you as far as just being an athlete and overcoming some little obstacles as a youngster, obviously, and then as you got older, and did it kind of shape who you are now as a father and as a mentor to a lot of these younger players and younger athletes or business owners, whatever it is?
Yes, my upbringing definitely helped strengthen my character and my ambitions and my drive. My mother was never around because my parents owned a restaurant, and with my father being drunk half of the time, she was the one who was in charge. So for me, it was like I went to my parents and I said I want to play hockey, and that was it. Like I was on my own. Like my parents didn't get me to the rink, didn't carry my equipment. I did that from day one, and I think one of the biggest benefits for me was that there was no one behind me pushing. I wanted this. I said, I want to be a professional hockey player, and I put all the work and efforts into it without anyone having to drag me to the rink. And this is one of the issues in today's sports world that, and I don't want to generalize, but there are parents out there who are too forceful and putting too much pressure. In my work, the youngest athletes I work with are 8 years old, and I have 8-year-old kids who are suffering from performance anxiety, and that can't be. When a kid starts to pick a sport that they want to pursue, whether it's, when they're 3, 4, 5 years old, they're not thinking about becoming a professional hockey player. They want to go out there and have fun. And this is what I always ask the parents, please let them have fun. If they feel that this is the dream that they want to pursue, they will do it. But if they're pressured into a position, into a sport, they will get to a point where they say, you know what, enough. I don't want it anymore. And I have that. And I've had kids that came to me, or I went to their house and we closed the door and they start crying. And I have a filter, but I have no problem talking to parents and say, listen, what you're doing here is destroying your child. You have to let them make the decision. Oh, yeah. And, a lot of times the answer is, well, they're way too young to make a decision. No, they're not. They know what they want and what they don't want. And we have to be compassionate and we have to be loving. And this is one thing I've learned through my upbringing. The children always come first. and it's what they want, not what I want.
Yeah. No, I think it's huge. I think, the other thing too, I find that our us, and I'll put myself in this grouping as well, is we all want our kids to have a bit of a better life than what we had, right? So we're going to buy them that new stick or that new soccer cleats or whatever it is, right? We want them to succeed. We want them to do better than we did. There's no doubt about it. But sometimes we forget that how we became who we are or what we are now or what our uncle is or whoever, that happened because there was struggle, because there was maybe no money, because you had to walk to the rink and do up your own skates at 11, right? Or if you forgot your stick at home, no one was going to drive it out to you. You had to borrow a stick or find a way to get another stick or run home and run back, whatever that is. And I find now as parents, we do too much for our kids. And I think it starts with little things, just even as far as, hey, check your gear before you go to the rink. And when we get to the rink and you don't have an elbow pad, you got to figure out how to get another elbow pad. So ask around, ask other kids. And I understand that 3 and 4 and 5, that's not realistic. But as they get older, that 7, 8, 9, they're smart enough, they're old enough, they kind of get it. But just having them haven't taken on a little bit more responsibility and if they have failures, I think it's okay. I think it's good. I think it helps build them up and obviously hopefully formulate some good young humans, right?
Yeah. When I share with my clients, with my young clients, how I started, they don't believe me, because the way I started was I had skates, I had gloves, I had a helmet. And then our coach said, we need a goalie. And believe it or not, okay, the kids couldn't raise the puck. They didn't have the equipment and the training they have today. I went into the net. I had warehouse catalogs and towels as shin pads. I had a towel as a cup, and that's how I went into the net. And I went home and I said to mother, look at my legs. And I showed her all the bruises, and every bruise meant that I stopped puck. And I was prouder than anything. And the first equipment that I got was hand-me-downs from our pro goalie. The pads went up to my belly button.
Yeah.
That's normal today. But my jersey was my father's winter sweater, and I had a Freddy Friday the 13th
yeah.
And that's how I started. And today, if it doesn't say a brand name on the equipment, they don't take it. Yeah. It's not about the gear, it's about you. It's about the effort you put into it and the drive you have. And this is also, the parents, they don't have to wear brands. If they want to improve, they improve. They don't need a $300 stick. They can have a $60 stick from Canadian Tire. And you're right. As a parent, we do too much, because the more you spoil them, the more content they get. And it's another mental issue, because if they get everything handed to them, they don't know what hard work is. And in order to make it to the pro level, in any sport, that's all it is. It's blood, sweat, and tears. It's sacrifice. You need to do things that you don't want to do. When others are out partying, you have to be in the gym. You have to be on the ice. And it's all in here. And this is why I say, it's at least 70% of an athlete's performance happens in here.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I think the big thing about the mental, that 70%, I agree. I think you need to have some natural ability or have some athleticism if you're going to play a sport, obviously. But I think that drive and that ambition to be better and improve and get better, and maybe miss that party or miss that dance on a Friday night because you have a game the next day and you should get your sleep or different things like that. I think those are important, really, really important decisions for as players get older. I think when they're young, I think it's really important for parents to make those experiences fun, like going to the rink or going to the soccer pitch. That should be fun. Don't worry about field time. Don't worry about how many touches you got. Don't worry about how many goals you scored. Just enjoy the process. Have fun going to the rink, putting your gear on, playing the game. Enjoy that. And then as they get older and more competitive, then I think that's when those tougher decisions come in. And for some of the players, I don't think it's hard. I don't think it's a real hard decision for them to miss a party or miss a dance or whatever in order to further what they want to do, And I think some of those decisions also, whether it's sport or not, I think those are decisions that they make at young ages that are going to impact them for life, where it's not that hard to make that decision when they're older, whether it's parenting or business or whatever it is, right? I think it's huge.
But this is also where the parents come in. It's all about guidance. And I always say to the parents, unless you played the sports for X amount of years and you have all the experience, leave the feedback and criticism to the coaches. As a parent, you're there, you're a support group. Focus on the positive. Don't point out the negatives, because that's what they get, what they hear in the dressing room. They don't need to hear it twice, because that's when the pressure comes in. When you can't, let yourself fall as soon as you get in the car, you might have a bad game, whether you missed a breakaway and you lost the game, or you get a weak goal in that lost you the game. Don't have the kid come into the car or out of the dressing room and jump all over it. Be a loving support, be understanding, be compassionate. Let the coaches deal with the rest. Because if you have the pressure on the ice in the dressing room, it's a different story than having added pressure when you're at home. Because that's where the anxiety starts.
Yeah, and I want to get into that a little bit about more of the anxiety and how kids do develop that anxiety at young ages, because a lot of times when I was talking to parents, I tell them that your son or daughter doesn't need another coach. They need a mom and a dad way more than they need another coach, right? So when they are in the car, you don't need to coach them again, and especially if you haven't played the game. I played a little bit of soccer, but not at a high level. If my kid's at a high level of soccer, I'm probably the last person that should be telling them how to play that ball or how to make that play. You know what I mean? That's up to the coaches to do that. I want to make sure that he's respectful, that he works hard, that she's, playing hard every game. She's showing up on time. She's a good teammate. Those are things that I can control as a parent. But yeah, you're right. And one thing I've started to do with my kids are young, but when we get in the car after a game or practice or whatever it is, I'll ask them questions. I'll let them carry the conversation. Like, hey, how'd you find the game? Oh, it was good. Maybe I was rattled because I thought he got short shifted, or I thought my daughter should have, whatever. It doesn't matter. But I'll ask them, oh, it was good. Who played well today? And they'll tell me who they thought played well. I'm like, it was great. And maybe I'll comment on, hey, I loved how you made passes today. You really passed the puck today. It was awesome. That was really good. But just asking them questions, because a lot of times when you start asking them questions, maybe you have some irritating things in your head about what went on. Maybe they didn't work hard enough, but you start asking them questions and they thought everything was great. They thought they did really well. And at those young ages, I think that's important. You're right, buddy. It was great. And I'm the one with the issue. I'm the dad. I'm the one with the issues. And I don't need to be bringing those on to you. You're right, man. You did a really good job. It was good. I don't need to be their coach in the car. They already have a coach that's in the rink with them. I'm just going to be their dad and talk to them and have fun with it more than anything. Now, as they get older, if they are serious about something, then those conversations might be, hey, do you think that you could have worked a bit harder? Do you think that maybe you could have made that player here or there? But I think going back to the question I wanted to ask you is, for parents, I guess this is maybe a question for me, help me out here. But, what can we do as parents to help ease that anxiety so our kids aren't anxious at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and worried about getting in the car or worried about having that conversation? Or, are there little hints or tips that, or advice, I guess, that we as parents could absorb as far as not doing this to our kids and creating those anxious moments for them?
Yeah. So I think you're on the right path. It's exactly the way it should be. Let the child lead the conversation. So, ask the child when it comes into the car or out of the dressing room, how was the game for you? How did you feel? How did you feel out there? What did you think you did great? Or where do you think you can improve? Leaving the conversation to the child is exactly the way it should be. I'm giving you 2 examples. I have started working with a 9-year-old who moved here from China a year and a half ago. Moved here, new team, new school, new teammates, no friends, different language, different culture. And they were here for 3 months. And the father reached out to me and asked if I would be willing to work with his son. And I said, of course. So I met with him. We sat in his room. And for half an hour, he was just sitting there staring at me. So I was very gently talking to him, asking him what's going on for him, how he's feeling, and then he started talking. And it was devastating. I had a hard time holding my tears back because I was so upset. He told me, exactly what I just said. New country. He didn't want to leave. New teammates. Doesn't know anybody. Nobody talks to him, and he was past the point of anxiety. He was depressed.
Yeah.
And he said, I get in the car after a game. My father yells at me, screams at me, and I stopped it right there and I had a conversation with the father. And after the first session, I met with him again, and he told me, all I want for my dad is to be my friend. I want to hang out with him. I want to play video games. I want him to spend time with me rather than being attacked every time. It took a couple of sessions, and thank goodness it stopped, and he's doing extremely well. And I had a 12-year-old goalie, AAA. The father said to me, yeah, he's doing great in practice. Every time he steps on the ice for a game, he freezes. And then I had a conversation with the wife. She said, you need to talk to my husband. She said he's destroying her child. And I had a heart-to-heart with him. And, there's parents who actually get it. And in these two examples, both dads did. But there's the opposite. How dare you? I'm the father. I parent the way I want to parent. And there's a nightmare and a recipe for disaster. Going back to your question, the best way to approach it is leave the criticism to the coaches, the feedback to the coaches. You can give positive feedback and focus on what your child did great or did very well, because that encourages, that keeps motivating and inspiring. Yelling at them, criticizing them on top of the criticism out of the dressing room is doing the opposite. So be compassionate, be loving, remove the sports from it and treat them exactly the way you do at home.
Yeah, no,
be a loving parent.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think that sometimes too, as a parent, so, one of the questions that popped in my head as you're talking about this is, yeah, but man, like my kids' coaches aren't that good. Like, they're not great coaches. I know he's not getting the feedback he should be getting. I know my daughter's not getting the feedback that she should be. She messed up that play, and I know they're not talking to her about it. And one of the things that I go back to on this is, and I've coached for a lot of years and dealt with a lot of young kids. And I think the one thing, again, going back to what I said earlier, and I want to hammer this a little bit for parents, is it should be fun at the young ages. And I feel like that 6, 7, 8 years old, if they miss a 2-on-1 or they don't know how to play a breakaway or whatever it is, doesn't matter. It's not going to affect them long term. Like, that's stuff that they're going to learn later as they get older. Then hopefully they're around better coaches and it'll get a little bit more serious for them. That's fine. But at young ages, it's got to be enjoyable. And you see kids that are anxious, man, and you see parents, that, and I love the fact you're having these conversations with parents, because I've had many of them with parents, and you're right. Some of them get it and they listen, and some of them don't. And you see them the next game, they're banging on the glass and they're coaching their kid from the stands, and they're doing all the things you just told them not to do. They're doing exactly that. And at the end of the day, who's that hurting? It's hurting their kid. And I think as parents, we all want what's best for our kids. We love our kids. We all want them to succeed. And some of these parents, it's not that they don't want their kid to succeed. They just can't control themselves, I think, sometimes, right? So I guess it's part of that too. Like, for the parents, what can we do to help control ourselves? Is it don't go to the rink maybe, or sit behind wherever you can sit away so the kids can't hear you? Like, I guess there's some stuff like that obviously that can be done, but I think a lot of it comes back to us as parents and how we control our emotions around our kids, right?
It is, it's devastating when you see some of the parents, how they react and how they embarrass their children.
Yeah.
I used to coach. I kicked parents out of the rink because of their behavior, their destructive behavior. I totally agree. When this happens, and this is where the coaches have to step in, when they see, and they know what's going on behind them, when they see this kind of behavior, they have to have a meeting with all parents and tell them, listen, this is what's going on. You're being destructive. you're actually hurting your child more than you're doing him any good or her any good. Please, for the next couple of games, until you have yourself under control, stay out of the rink. Stand somewhere, sit somewhere where the kids can't hear you. They let them know that you're there, and you will see how the performance of many children will improve when they don't have that pressure of a parent yelling at them. I recently, that was before the lockdown, the goalie that I was talking about, I went to one of his games, and he has a teammate who's a young Russian kid. Phenomenal talent, 100%. He's going to be pro hockey player, 100%. He dominates that league. And his father is running up and down the stands, screaming at him, yelling at him, intimidating him. If he doesn't stop, despite all the talent that this kid has, he might quit. Because he's embarrassing the kid. And when you see the kid's reaction on the ice, the body language, he is totally filled with anxiety. And that's not the way it should be. For what? So you can say, oh, I made him an NHL player or not. But the mental and psychological damage that he's doing to that kid is irreparable. So we have to be compassionate. We have to be sensitive. And we have to think child first.
Yeah. And not to mention how embarrassing it is for that young boy, right?
Yeah.
And he's only 12 now, but let's say 13, 14, 15. And the other thing a lot of parents don't realize is that their kids are the ones playing, and the parents are the direct reflection of them at that point. So, it's happened to me before where I went to watch a young boy play. I walked in the arena. This father had called me to come and check his son out, and he was looking to play junior hockey. And so I went and checked. Within probably, no joke, a minute or two of being at the rink, I had never met the father before, but a minute or two being at the rink, I knew exactly who the kid's dad was, because just the way he was talking, yelling, and I knew exactly what kid was his. And I let the game go, and I let it all go by. And then after the game, we sat in the parking lot and chatted. And I told the father, I'm like, you can't be like that. I said, if a scout comes in to watch your son, they're going to watch you. They're going to know exactly who you are. And I've had these conversations with scouts and GMs and stuff. And your son's going to fall in his status just because you're a little bit crazy and you're coming across as crazy, and no one wants to deal with that. And it's not fair for that kid or that, son or daughter who's putting their, love and passion in the game and working hard. And now you're taken away from it by acting the way you're acting, behind the scenes,
No, we have to think about the fact that, if they make it to a professional level, say they get drafted to the NHL, scouts and team managers look at that because they're only 18 years old, and the teams will still deal with the parents, and they don't want to deal with the crazy parents because it's a reflection on their organization. So we have to be mindful. As much as we want what we think is the best for our children, but we have to let the children be children and allow them to decide what's best for them. It's not for us to decide.
Yeah. No, and I think, you said it earlier, I think guidance is huge. And obviously we're going to help push one way or the other. If we feel they shouldn't go to that dance, we're going to recommend, hey, I think you should stay home and sleep the first couple of times, and hopefully they'll get it and they'll make those decisions on their own, which I think is huge. And one thing too, as players get up, and a lot of parents listen to this will be like, well, no, in the NHL, parents don't deal with coaches and GMs. 100% correct. They do not deal with coaches and GMs, but who does now is their agents. So that same kid who had mom and dad emailing the coach after a game, or dad snapped and emailed the coach after the game, that same father now is texting the agent or calling the agent and saying, hey, get my kid traded out of this junior team. He's not playing enough. He's not going enough. And now the agent's doing so. You're just replacing the parent with the agent, and that agent's now getting it from the parents or from their client, the player. And those are all things. I've been in offices where the coach gets called after practice from an agent, and the player's sitting 30 feet away in the locker room. For me, as maybe an older school guy, how does that player not come and talk to the coach rather than go through the back channels of an agent? Which it's the same thing as a parent. Why is a parent emailing the coach when the kid's 14 years old? about ice time? Why is the kid not coming in and talking to the coach and say, hey, coach, listen, how can I get more ice time? What do I need to do to play on the top line? Or what do I need to do to play penalty kill or power play? And that's the miss right there, where it's going to be the same thing at the higher levels. You're going to go through the same problems. It's just now diverted through an agent or somebody else that's going to be doing that talking, right?
It all goes back to what we talked about earlier. It's when the parents do too much and serve everything on a silver platter to their child. If you take care of all of your child's needs, your child will always need a parent. And in that moment, the agent becomes the parent. They are not capable of working independently or making a decision independently. They always have to have that agent, parent, you name it, to take care of their needs. And that has to stop. We have to be able to teach our children to be independent. Yeah. We have to stop creating codependent relationships with our children because it's becoming a bigger and bigger issue.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear what you think about this, but I feel a lot of that comes down to the communication skills in general. And, everyone can say what they want about social media and all this stuff, but that's the new life. That's what we're going to have. It's not going to go anywhere for the next little while. Our kids are going to be on iPads and they're going to be, it's going to be different than what we were. Right. So that's fine. I think we need to accept it, but there still is something to be said about that young boy or girl that can go ask their teacher why they didn't get a good mark on this test, or go ask the coach why they're playing defense instead of center when they really want to play center. Now, those aren't easy conversations, because I'm sure you remember trying to go talk to your coaches as a youngster. It's nerve-wracking. You're nervous. You don't want to say anything. You mess up your words. But when they do it at a young age, at 5 or 6, asking whatever that is, and you help them, coach them through it a little bit, and then it gets easier and easier and easier. And then they're able to talk for themselves. They're able to communicate with authority figures and parents and coaches, and now they're able to fend for themselves a little bit better. And to me, that's going to help them, serve them way better in life, let alone sport. It'll hopefully help them through sport or whatever they're doing. But I think just being able to have those, kind of almost rekindle or work on those communication skills, I think is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Interpersonal relationships are so key in life. And unfortunately, our devices are teaching us something different. But in order to be successful in life, you can't just depend on your social media and your phone and iPad and laptop. You need to learn to communicate. And this is one thing that I always emphasize on when I'm working with young kids and their parents, that they learn how to communicate what they need and want, and not have the parents communicate it.
Yeah.
Super important.
How often how often is that conversation brought up with some of your younger, clients that you work with and stuff, where, you realize after meeting with the parents, that there's not a lot of communication between the athlete and the parent themselves. So the son, daughter, and the parent, like that bridge has got to get formed a little bit better in order for things to move along, I'm assuming, right?
All the time. I have this conversation with, I would say, 95% of my young athletes and parents, because what is created by a lot of parents' behavior is a wall where the child is afraid to communicate. So they are intimidated because the parent yells at them after a bad game or after a mistake, whether it's in the stands, in the car, or at home. We need to allow our children to have a voice, like from as early as possible. As soon as they start to verbally communicate, we have to make sure that they feel safe to communicate. When they get into sports, they have to have a voice. They have to know that when the child says, you know what, I don't feel like going to the rink today, unless, there's an excuse that they don't want to go because they really don't want to play, or they rather hang out and watch TV. Then, of course, you say, you know what, you committed to this, you go to the rink. But when a kid says, you know what, I'm not feeling well today, accept that. Don't think because you feel they have to go that they should go. Let the kids have a voice. And if a kid says, you know what, I don't want to play hockey anymore, I would rather play soccer. You can fight that and argue that until you turn blue in the face. If your kid doesn't want to play, you can drag them to the rink every single day. And what is that going to do? It's not going to make him a good hockey player. It's not going to make him a good soccer player if you drag him to the pitch, or a good tennis player if you drag him to the court when they make very clear that they don't want to do that anymore. Goes back to what I said earlier. It's about the child. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's not about any other parent. It's about the child. We can force what we want for them onto them. But when they get to an age where they're like 13, 14, 15 years old, they're going to walk away. And you can't do anything about it. And you wasted years of the child's life, your life, a lot of money, and you pushed your child away because that's not going to get you a closer relationship. So we need to listen to our children to an extent, of course.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. Number one. And, I mean, we went through it as a family. I have a younger brother who we played hockey. Same thing, started later, but kind of went through it. And he liked it, didn't love it, was really good at it, just didn't have that drive and that passion. And I think it was in probably 13, 14, he told my parents, like, I don't want to play anymore. And my dad probably took it hard. My parents were not hard on us at all, but he, loved the fact that he played and he was good at it. But they let him stop. He ended up getting into skiing a little bit and some downhill skiing and stuff. And then ended up coming back the next year and wanted to play with his buddies and play, A hockey, which worked out great and, finished up and had a really good time. But it's one of those things now looking back on it, now that I'm a parent, I'm like, man, that was pretty, big of my parents to say, okay, no problem. You don't want to play. Cause that's something we did from 9 till, 4 or 5 years in a row. We were at the rinks all winter, but it's not easy sometimes, I think, for parents to allow those decisions to be made, right? Whether they're passionate about the sport and they love seeing their kid play it. They enjoy being at the rink. It's social for them. They have friends there. There are tournaments. It's, for the parents, you get into a groove where you enjoy it. It's part of your culture. It's part of your life now. And, to hear your son or daughter say, no, I don't want to do that anymore. I think sometimes the parents take it a little bit personally, and it's a tough decision for everybody, right?
It's tough, definitely tough. But at the end of the day, we have to allow our children to make that decision when they're at a point where they say, you know what, I don't feel it. I don't want it. It doesn't bring me joy. It doesn't make me happy.
Yeah.
We have to, as much as it hurts and as much as we have to bite our tongue, we have to accept it. Because if it's not then, it's going to be a couple of years later.
Yeah.
And why waste another couple of years?
And those couple of years could be a grind, right? If you got a kid that doesn't really want to do something, you're dragging them and fighting. And that could be a lot of headaches for nothing, I guess. Going back to the mental part of the game though, and kind of developing those, because I think that's something that I've had quite a few people on, and that's one thing that comes up, whether I'm talking to players or coaches or anybody, the mental part of the game, how a player has that mental toughness to drive through adversity or play a bad game and bounce back from it, play a bad shift and bounce back from it. And I know it's something that, we talk about this a lot about, I want to get bigger arms. I'm going to do bicep curls. I'm going to work out in the gym. Well, how do I get my mind bigger? How do I get my mind stronger? How do I, harden my mind basically? And I think that's something that is such an asset right now for players that are starting to do that already. Maybe have parents that are helping with that, just not even knowing just the way that they're parenting, which I think is huge. Yeah. And on the flip side of that, I think there's a lot of parents that are maybe doing a disservice to their kids mentally and making it, almost softening their mental part of the game or their mental part of life, right? When you think back for yourself kind of personally, was there a time in your life that, that kind of hardened you, that made you a lot more mentally tough? Like you said, you went through anxiety issues and stuff. Obviously you found a way to cope with it and deal with it. Was there any kind of things that happened throughout your personal experiences that kind of helped you obviously, harden up and because for you going into pro at 16, that's super young. And then being able to play for, over 20 years, that's huge, So how did you kind of overcome that and help yourself mentally, I guess, being able to play at a high level, especially as a goaltender?
The early years were easier because when you're that young, you don't think as much. I just went with it. I was not expected to do as well as I did the first 3-4 years of my pro career, and then you have an expectation in yourself, right? You did well, and you want to maintain that or even get better. And I found ways to, I worked on focus exercises, for an example, simple stuff that I created myself, like just looking at a bird in the sky and following the bird and focus and focus and focus. Very dry, but very effective. And then once I got a little older and had higher expectation in myself and felt that the expectation in me was higher, I was struggling. I'm not going to lie. I had ups and downs. I had anxiety attacks before games, and I had no idea what was going on. Like I thought I'd have a heart attack.
Really?
And yeah, it was bad. And I didn't talk about it. I would not share it with anybody because I was afraid that they say you can't play. So if you don't play, especially as a goalie, you lose your starting job. Yeah. So I internalized a lot of things and found ways through reading books on psychology, how I can help myself. Wasn't really sports related, but it was about mental struggles and people who are suffering from abuse, and that really helped me. But there were struggles along my way, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There was performance enhancing drugs that I took and other stuff at one point where I couldn't deal with it anymore. But when I realized what I was doing to myself, it stopped immediately. And I think that phase really gave me a mental boost. And I found out for myself that I'm mentally a lot stronger than I gave myself credit for.
Yeah. And just to put things into perspective real quick though, I want to, cause you mentioned, performance enhancing drugs, things like that. I think, back, you're maybe a little bit older than I am, but kind of same generation ish. And back then it was a lot different. There wasn't a lot of strength training was very, barbaric when we look at it now, right? There was a lot of bench press and like crazy, stuff that we probably did too much stuff that we didn't really need to do. A mental part of the game. I mean, if you told anybody that you're having any kind of mental issues, you'd be gone. Like you're a psycho, go see a psychologist, like put you in a padded room. Like, so no one really talked about that stuff at all. And then talking, and for people that don't know, in Europe, that professional ranks are a little bit different. You play junior, and then if you're good enough, you get thrown in with the men. And you're a 16-year-old, 17-year-old learning the way, and they're hoping that one day you'll be able to play, legit pro. And but at young ages, you guys started playing with the men and playing professional hockey. So you're again exposed to bus rides, smoking, drinking, playing cards, like all the stuff that goes with it, which is a lot different. And those are things that some players, I'm sure you saw a lot of them go down the wrong path and get completely absorbed at that, and they're done earlier. And you have other ones that overcome these different obstacles. And whether that's performance enhancing drugs, whatever it is, there's a lot of things I think that athletes did back then, which in a different way they do now, but to try to get that edge, to try to, get that next contract, to try to play that extra year, get stronger, faster, whatever it was. So it was more the culture back then where you just did what you saw around you and what other guys and people were doing to perform better. And I think it's a part of the culture back then, which is obviously changed a little bit now. But so I think for you, I mean, seeing all that kind of stuff, and I'm assuming, I know for me personally, some of my darkest years were, when I look back now, were my best years mentally. I was in the dumps. It was terrible mentally, but I look back and I'm like, that made me so much stronger. So kind of what you're saying right now, as far as when you got out of that, you're like, oh, I'm mentally tougher than I thought, right?
Yeah, I got out of it, and I felt, like I said, like I got this boost, and looking at what other guys did and figuring out that I don't need that. And after I figured it out, I still had another 10 years in my career, and I probably would have had a little longer if it wasn't for a career-ending injury. But it is, when I compare back then to now, it has changed, but it hasn't. Because the issues are still apparent. The drugs might have changed. The culture might have changed. But in a way, it's actually gotten worse because through this whole social media, the mainstream media, the fans, the teams, the pressure has increased tenfold. And that's why there's more and more athletes, because of this pressure and more and more competition, there's more and more of the anxiety, more and more of finding ways to cope with the pressure and the anxiety and the depression. And this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, because we need to stop this. We need to make sure that our athletes are protected, that they have a sounding board, and that they have a go-to person on every team that they trust and that they know will understand where they're coming from. That's something that we're lacking.
Yeah, no, I think, and you said it in part of your story, like when you started hearing other stories from other players or reading books or, reading articles of players going through stuff that maybe you were going through identically or something along those lines, you kind of felt better knowing that somebody else in the world was going through something that you did. And then I think the more you talk about it, I know for me, the more I started talking about it and opening up about different issues that had happened or different things, you realize, there's a lot of people going through the same thing, right? There's a lot of people that have experienced that or may have gone through worse and have come out really well on the other side. So I think the more that we can communicate that, the more that we can talk, the more that we can say it's okay to be a little bit depressed. It's okay to go through a slump and feel like you want to quit. We've all gone through that. But these are some ways or some tools that can help get you out of that. I think that is huge. That whole, being open and honest about it, I think is massive, especially for the younger players that are coming up now.
It is absolutely crucial because on the one side, when you hear and read and see that others are going through similar issues, it helps you knowing that you're not alone, but it devastates you that there's no one who will change it. And we have to remove the stigma that is still attached to mental illness, to depression, anxiety, and to addiction. Because if we don't remove this, it's never going to stop. And it's in our hands to stop it and to let these guys and girls know that there's help and that it actually can be avoided before it gets to that point.
Yeah. And I think, just if I look back on my years of playing and then post-playing, even just, in business and stuff like that, I feel like, I was never clinically diagnosed as being depressed or having depression or anything like that, but I feel like I've had bouts of depression. There's no doubt about it. I think we all have. And I started communicating that with people that I knew that were going through some tough times. And I'd be able to kind of pinpoint times in my life where I got stuck in a rut. Things weren't going well. And then that's when, whatever vices you get into, whether it's taking a nap every day or getting stuck watching movies for 4 or 5 hours a day or substances or whatever it is. I think a lot of people, if not everybody, has experienced some small little forms of depression or different things like that. And I think, again, going back to that communication piece, the more you talk about it with other people, like, okay, I'm normal. All right, this is normal. And like you said, not normalizing the whole thing, but being able to take that stigma away from it that, ooh, you got problems. Wow, what are we going to do with you? It's no, this is fine. It's like breaking your arm. It's, you got a bruise on your brain. Let's try to fix it. Let's do some work to try to get that back to where it needs to be. And I think, having gentlemen like you and people in that profession that are open and willing to talk about it, I think is huge. And I think it is important to start with younger people. I think it's important to start with 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds. And I'm not saying they have to go for weekly appointments, but even just parents knowing and getting some resources that they can use to help their children, I think is massive.
It's a very easy in to have this kind of communications by just checking in. You can say to your child, hey, I just want to check in. How are you feeling today? How are you feeling about the game? How you're feeling after school or what's going on? this is how you build that trusting relationship that is so important for later when there might be issues on the surface. That the kids know, you know what, I can talk to my parents about everything and anything. They don't have to hide anything, but if you're constantly on top of your child, why didn't you perform? Why didn't you score? Why didn't you stop that? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? They will shut down. This is not a question of when or if, it's a question of when. They will shut down and they will not have that trust that they can come to you with anything and everything. And if we don't start that at a very young age, it's really hard to build that trust when they're 15, 16 years old, when they want to go their own ways and when they want to hang out with their friends because they think that you're not cool. You know, we have to build this trust. And when it comes to professional athletes, they have to build that trust within their teams or within their support group. They have to know that there's someone there. It's not like, oh, I get traded and I can go to him and talk about my depression or my anxiety, because I don't know if he will go to the management and say, hey, we got to get rid of this guy because he's mentally not strong enough. So it's super important that we build the trust relationship.
Yeah, no, I think that's massive. And I think I'm just speaking from personal experience. I know with my parents, I was very fortunate. They were open with everything, but that started, like you said, at young ages with my parents for sure. But I never felt judged, meaning if I remember I got my first speeding ticket at 16 years old, and first I came home right away and said, hey mom, I got a speeding ticket today. But I knew when I came home and told my mom, she wasn't going to snap on me. She wasn't going to take the car away. She wasn't going to ground me. You know, it was more okay. And I already had a plan, like I'm going to pay it. I was only, 15 over or whatever. But I knew that I wasn't going to get punished for telling her that, you know what I mean? And I think that was important. And even if there was a speeding ticket's not a big deal, but at 16, that was kind of a big deal. Your first ticket, you're like, oh man, am I going to lose the car? But I knew that we'd have a conversation about it. What happened? Why were you speeding? You can't do that, whatever. But I think that for parents, I think at young ages, not getting mad, not snapping about a kid breaking a window, or which we've all done. Like, let's be honest, if you kicked the ball or shot a puck somewhere, you've all broken stuff. So, you dinged a car with a bike, like it's going to happen. But when you start snapping on all those different things and losing your mind as a parent, because it is frustrating, don't get me wrong, but then it becomes easier and easier for your kids to tell you stuff, and I think I think that's huge, for the long run, obviously.
This is exactly what happened in my childhood. I could never tell my dad anything I did wrong because I knew he would beat me to a pulp. So what you said is exactly a perfect example. You did it. You went to your mother because you knew that she's not going to rip your head off, that there's not going to be dire consequences, because you trust your mother.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and this is our responsibility to build that trusting relationship, whether it's with your children or in an athletic setting with your athletes.
Well, and I think even more importantly, like even as a coach, right? Like you've coached and played at a high level, but you have that coach that's a snap show and that, is getting mad at you for every little thing you've done. Let's be honest. If you play any sport, the sport's built on mistakes. How do other teams score goals? Somebody made a mistake. How do they get a power play? Somebody made a mistake. So I think as a coach, understanding that and also trying to remember what it was like when you played. Like clearing the puck out of the zone off the glass isn't the easiest thing in the world to do. And you're going to mess it up sometimes. So when you get to the bench, coach yells at you for not clearing the puck. Well, hey buddy, I know that's tough. Next time, just make sure you got a better handle on it before you try to throw it away. Like, okay, now if it's happening 3, 4, 5 times in a row, that's a different conversation. But if you know that you're going to get some, some criticism, that's fine, but it's going to be constructive. It's in a good way. I think then you build that trust with your coaches and your players. And then that's a different season for those players as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see it up at the NHL level. There's a couple of coaches. I mean, one is gone now, but he was to the players as players came out after a bully.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to play for him. And it showed. And you can't gain your players' respect if you do not respect them. So whether it's at the entry level, whether it's in minor hockey, whether it's in pro hockey, there has to be a trusting relationship. And we start that at the youngest level. We
Yeah.
have to start that at the youngest level.
Yeah, no, definitely, for sure. Now, kind of as you got into your life after hockey and now doing what you do now, was there any kind of major changes as far as, when you started working with, business people or athletes or different things like that? Did you notice kind of things starting to change, let's say from a couple years, let's say 5 years ago to 3 years ago to now? There's been some major changes that you can think of in the athletes and the business people you've talked to?
There's, thank goodness, a growing awareness of how important the mental issue is, or the mental aspect is. And you can draw a connection between athletes and high-end executives, CEOs, because there's pressure on either side and there's anxiety on either side. If you have a multi-billion-dollar company or multi-million-dollar company, there's always the pressure of performing at a high level. And when you have that kind of a business, the higher you go, the bigger the pressure. And now, over the last 5 years, it's actually pretty recent. More and more high-end business people understand that they have to do something to deal with their mental pressure and with their performance anxiety. And it's the same in sports. There's a growing awareness that, your body is obviously your temple and this is how you perform, but your mind tells you when and how to perform. And if your body and mind are not in alignment, you will never be successful. And it's whether you're a business owner or a high-end executive or an athlete. So there's a big similarity that is between business and sports. And like I said, there's this growing awareness that your mental strength is super important.
No, yeah, which makes total sense for sure. Now, what are some of those characteristics that you see when you're working with like a high-end business executive and then maybe a high-end hockey player or a high-end athlete? What are some of those characteristics that you see kind of highlighted in each, despite being different ages probably and totally different fields, but what are some of those characteristics that you kind of see that kind of cross over?
This is an interesting question because, and I don't want to generalize, but there's a similar trait that you find in high-end business people and in high-end professional athletes, and that is their attitude and their character. A lot of them have this chip on their shoulders, and it's not the most positive trait, but when you approach it properly, you can actually make them aware of how that is not very benefiting their success. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. Some are more successful than others, but that is not a reason to treat people differently or look down on people. At the end of the day, you worked hard for your success, and it should make you humble rather than arrogant. And when I look at, especially at athletes, be grateful, because first of all, you have a gift. Yes, you still have to work hard to get to the highest level, but it started off with a gift. You have some sort of talent or skill that was given to you, and be grateful. And always treat people with respect, because at the end of the day, the people that you are mistreating are the people who are paying for your paycheck. Yeah. So I always share with my athletes that one of the best traits an athlete and even my business clients, the best trait you can have is being humble and grateful.
Yeah. And one thing I find too, when I'm dealing with higher end athletes as in hockey players, which is what I deal with on a daily basis, is, I talk to them a lot about walking that line of being cocky and confident. So talking a little bit about that humbleness, but I think that any high-end player that I've ever dealt with has that confidence. They're confident in their ability. They, and they go through slumps, and I'm sure there's times where they go to the bench and they're saying to themselves, like we all do, like, I suck. How did I miss that pass? And they have some negative self-talk. There's no doubt about it. But overall, they're confident. The ones that get too cocky, I think, are the ones that do themselves more harm than good. They're a little bit too out there. They're a little bit too, some have to play on the edge. There's no doubt about it. But I think that confident to cocky line is a tough one, and it gets blurred a little bit. And I think you see the same thing probably in high-end executives and business owners. Yeah. And, they're sometimes a little bit too cocky, a little too big for their britches when, that they need to get humbled a little bit sometimes and bring it back a little bit and stay confident, obviously. But yeah, it becomes, I think, a bit of a harmful trait when you get a little bit too cocky.
When you're in business and you have that kind of attitude, it will always come back to haunt you, because at some point people will say, you know what, I don't deal with this guy anymore. I could give you a couple of examples, but I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. But I know of business owners, they park their Bentley right in front of the door and just to show off, and they don't want to talk to anybody, and they treat their employees like they're floor mats, and that's not the way life works. Like I said, somewhere down the road, karma is going to get them, and it never pays out. If you're successful, good for you. If you have millions and billions of dollars, that's great. I'm sure you worked hard for it, but there's no reason for you to treat anyone with disrespect just because you have more than they have. Yeah. And it's the same with athletes. Be grateful that you're making $10 million a year. It can be gone by tomorrow. I had the experience with my injury. I never thought it would happen to me, and I was blessed that it happened after 21 years. It could have happened in my first year. Be grateful. Yeah, I never played on the NHL level. I never made millions of dollars, but I made a living for 21 years, and for that I'm super grateful. And I always respected the people who came to the rink and asked for autographs. I've seen NHL players who treated kids like I remember, again, I'm not going to mention a name, but it was a high-end, very high-end player, and we were skating in the summer, and we're sitting in the dressing room, and little kids came in the dressing room and wanted autographs. And he says to one of the kids, it was an 8-year-old little boy asking for an autograph, and he said to him, quote unquote, "Oh, I'm not going to sign that picture because you're going to put it on eBay and sell it," to an 8-year-old.
Right.
We were all sitting there and we're like, did this really just happen? It's great to be successful, but it's a gift.
Well,
and you work hard for it.
Yeah.
Cherish it.
No, and I think, anybody who's had success, 99% of them have worked very hard to get to where they are. There's no doubt about it. But there's also, when you start peeling back the layers of it, there's some things that happen that were very fortunate for them. And whether that's a family business, whether that's their best buddy was a programmer and that's how they got into whatever they're doing now, or, there's certain things that have happened that maybe it was good luck. Maybe it was a little bit of hard work that caused some luck, or good opportunities, or right time, right place. But there's usually some reason why, they were able to get to that place, whether their parents opened up a lot of doors for them to get them extra training, or they got in front of a good coach that helped them kind of bring their game to the next level. And I agree. I think a lot of times people forget that. And, it's all me, it's all me, it's all me. When you actually sit down and think back at your past, there's a lot of good things that happen because this person entered your life, or you crossed paths with this person, or you got a door opened up on this side of it. And I think that is something to reflect on every once in a while, especially for the people that, anybody. I think if you're wildly successful, or you've got a family and kids and you've got a good job, I think we can all reflect on what got us to where we are and how we got to where we are. And I think it's a big, it's a big piece of everyone's success.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. And, it's always refreshing when you work with people who have that gratitude attitude and understand that their hard work was one piece of the puzzle, but there were many other pieces that got them to where they are now. And without these pieces, they couldn't have made it. At the end of the day, when you're successful, there's a lot of factors that play into that, not just your heart.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now, where do you see kind of the whole mental performance side of the game, the sports psychology part of the game? Where have you seen it come in the last 10 years, and where do you see it going in the next, couple years, 5 years, however long you want to say? But, is it something that is becoming way more mainstream, which I believe it is, but you're in the field, so I'm going to ask you. I don't want to answer for you, but is it, where does it come from basically, and how is it moving forward? Is it going in a good direction?
It's come a long way. That's for sure. The last 10 years, a lot of teams, a lot of athletes, a lot of businesses have learned to understand that our mental strength is key to success. Excuse me. And I am very happy to see the development over the last 10 years. And I think it's going to skyrocket in the next 5 years because there's more and more athletes understanding the importance of a mental coach or a sports psychology coach. Excuse me.
Yeah, no problem.
And sorry. It's going to be on the up and up. And there's more and more coaches who it makes me very, very happy and excited. I mean, yeah, it's competition, but at the end of the day, I'm thinking about the athletes, about the business people who will truly benefit from it. Yeah. I'm super excited to work with more high-end professionals and also with more athletes on the professional level. I'm in negotiation with some teams in Germany, which is super exciting for me. And I see a huge upswing in the next 5 years.
Oh, that's great. I think it's definitely something that any young player or even older player or even business, whatever, who's taken advantage of that whole industry, I think is at an advantage now because it's such a big part of just life, let alone performance. But obviously it's going to go hand in hand with, with creating better performances by athletes or by business owners or by, executives, whoever that is. So I think it's anybody who's been on it for a bit or been involved with mental training and working with somebody, I think is huge. Now, what kind of advice, I've asked the question before, what kind of advice would you give parents looking or seeking out a mental coach or a sports psychology coach? Like how do you, cause there is a lot more getting into it. There's a lot more people that are, getting certified, and what those certifications look like, I don't know. I'm not in that industry. Yeah. So for me, as just a father, parent, maybe a business owner, business executive, looking at getting into or looking at seeking somebody out, what kind of advice would you give them to look for, and how do you find the best suit for you?
So the way I look at it is you can have a sports performance coach who has all the certifications, but no background in sports. In terms of business, same thing. Make sure they have at least some background in business and know what they're talking about, rather than just having a background in psychology, but no business background. Do your due diligence. Take your time. Ask for certification, because there's a lot of people out there who don't even have a certification. They just say, I gave advice to my uncle and I know everything about sports psychology or business psychology. Make sure that they can show you their certification, or at least share with you where they got certified. And to me, background is almost more important than the certification. If they haven't walked the walk, they can talk the talk. Someone who wants to talk to me about performance anxiety or pressure in sports and never had the experience, what it's like to perform in front of 15,000 people, I don't know how they can understand what it's like. As you know, being a professional athlete is a whole different world than being a business owner. The life that a professional athlete lives is very unique in many ways. So I would always suggest and recommend make sure they have a background in sports if you're looking for a mental coach in sports or a sports psychology coach, but also a background in psychology or at least a certification. Any certification that involves sports psychology is pretty broad, and it's not like, okay, you can do a weekend course and you're a certified sports psychology coach.
Yeah. And I think you probably see that more and more now with the industry getting bigger and becoming more predominant and more mainstream. You see a lot more people kind of popping out of nowhere that, like you said, get that weekend course or that, and I think for parents out there, I think it is a lot of, you're looking on the internet, you're maybe getting recommended, to somebody by a friend or by somebody that's using a sports psychologist or a mental coach. So I think, you said something there that I think is really important to do your homework, look stuff up, and I always, I think it's important for parents to court a couple of people, like meet them, whether it's through Zoom or on a phone call or and tell, talk to them and almost, it sounds cheesy, but almost interviewing them a little bit and make sure it's the right fit for you or your athlete or, make sure that it works for both sides.
It's not cheesy at all. I do this with all of my clients, whether they just are interested or they're serious about working with me. You need to have a conversation because coaching, especially when it comes to mental coaching, there has to be a connection. There has to be chemistry. You can't just say, okay, I'm working with Jens, and then after the second session, you feel like, okay, I know he knows his stuff, but I don't feel that there's any chemistry or connection here. So I always do a 30-minute discovery meeting where I have a chat. We don't really get into too many details, but you can say, or you can figure out within those 30 minutes whether or not there is a connection there. I've had clients or I've had these discovery meetings where I said afterwards, you're a great guy, girl, but it's not going to work because there's no connection here, and vice versa. It's super important that you might get lucky and do one meeting, whether it's in person or virtual, and say, you know what, I feel so comfortable, let's do this. But if you don't feel that right away within those 30 minutes, keep looking. Do 2-3 more interviews and then decide where you feel most comfortable.
Yeah,
definitely important.
Yeah, I know it's huge for sure. Listen, I really appreciate you popping by today. I've got one quick question. I meant to ask you this earlier, but what was the career-ending injury? So I know, obviously, long career, but what happened?
I blew up my shoulder. I had a 230-pound, 6'4" defenseman falling on my back, and my arm was against the goalpost. I was on my knees, and my arm stayed. The guy fell on my back and pushed my entire body forward. So my shoulder, all of this was back here for over 3 hours. I had everything torn. Went through 6 months of intensive rehab. Went back on the ice, first practice, did a poke check, hyperextended my shoulder, tore my labrum again, and they said you have to do the surgery again. I'm like, done. Not doing that again.
Not doing that again. And how is it now? Is it like, is it shoulder okay as far as what you need day to day and functional and stuff?
Yeah,
good.
For day to day, it's good.
Good. Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's always the one thing whenever players get injured, obviously, or any kind of career-ending stuff, you're sad that the game's over, and obviously that must have been really, really tough. But you also want to be able to pick your kids up at 50 and 60, and you know what I mean, still be able to walk around and do what you need to do for sure.
Yeah, no, it was devastating because, like I said, I was not prepared for it. I thought I'd play another 2 years and figure out what I want to do, but God had a different plan, and He said, you know what, you're done. And yeah, it was tough.
How'd you go through that? Actually, yeah, like you go through rehab hoping that you're going to get back. And obviously, 6 months after surgery, you feeling good, get back on the ice, blow it out again, get that news. And now it's like making that decision. What was it like making that decision? And kind of how'd you get through that next month, 6 months, year? Because I know it's not easy when guys stop playing, especially when you've got, that's your life for so long, right?
The problem for me was I went into it so young and, never really had anyone that was, where your parents come in as well. Never had anyone saying, you know what, you have to think about what happens after hockey. So I was a little naive, say the least, and I thought, I can play forever. And when it stopped, like when I had to retire, I knew the second it happened, I knew my career was over. But I was so stubborn. My doctors told me, you will never play competitive hockey again. And I was like, I will show you. And I went through 6 months of hell. And then when I realized it really is over, I fell in such a deep hole.
Yeah.
I had no idea what to do with myself because hockey was what I knew. And, for 21 years, hockey was my family. And it was like my family opened the door and kicked me to the curb. That's exactly how it felt. So I was severely depressed. And I dabbled into so many things. I was assistant general manager for a team for a year and then decided to take a break from hockey. I got into the fitness industry, got all my certifications, got my athletic trainer and got my sports marketing diploma and nothing, you're looking for that gratification, for that adrenaline rush, but nothing can replace what you had. And then I decided to move to Dubai. I lived there for 6 months and then moved to Canada and got back into hockey. And that's when I started feeling better, when my mental state actually gotten better. And I met a woman here in Toronto who was training to be a psychotherapist, and I learned a lot through her. And I actually started working with a therapist, and I was 43 at the time. And when I started working with him, he was the first one after 37 years who diagnosed me with PTSD.
Really?
Caused by severe childhood trauma.
Wow.
And that was life-changing. So my anxiety subsided, and I've learned a lot about why I was the way I was.
Now, when you said it was kind of life-changing, I could only imagine, but was the relief from actually finally getting diagnosed and having a bit of a reason behind the problem or in front of the problem, I guess? Or was it more knowing what it was, then, okay, now I can find more stories, I can find coping, I can see what's worked for other people. Like, what was it? Was it finding out what it was, getting diagnosed, or was it more, okay, now I can recover from this because I know what it is?
It was both, but mainly it was a huge relief because for 37 years, I thought I was crazy because I was always told I don't have anything.
Right.
It was all in my head. So I finally had the confirmation that I'm not crazy, that there really is something going on.
Man, it's crazy it took that long, right? And I mean, and you're not alone. I mean, there's people right now walking around that are undiagnosed probably and are just battling through it, week to week or month to month or day to day, depending on when these episodes are happening or, I mean, and I can't imagine what the self-talk, in your mind was over all those years of just kind of almost probably beating yourself up a little bit mentally. Just, what's wrong with me? Why am I like this? What's going on? Right.
Yeah, exactly. It was exactly the way it was. And, it was devastating because it got to a point where I couldn't talk to anybody about it because whenever I talked to someone about it, they say, you don't have anything. The doctors told you don't have anything. So stop it.
Yeah.
It was very, very rough.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, especially, and I mean, unfortunately for you, probably more of the time that you were going through this back then was just, you didn't really, that wasn't a thing, right? It's like getting a concussion in hockey back when we played. Like, it wasn't really a thing. You got your bell rung, so you're gonna sit out a shift and go back, or maybe sit out a game because you have a headache. But there was no real sitting out for concussions very often unless you really got hammered, you know?
No. I was actually had a bad concussion, played in the first period. Guy kneed me. I wasn't really out, but I went into the dressing room, and after I got hit, I have no memory. And the next thing I remember was I was sitting in the dressing room and I putting my chest protector back on, and my teammates were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm going out to finish the game." They're like, "Game is over." And what happened was, first intermission, I was in the dressing room and I have no memory of this. Coach came in and he said, "Are you okay to play?" And supposedly I said yes, and I played 2 periods of hockey and I have no memory of it.
No way.
Absolutely zero.
Did you guys win?
Yeah. We won, and they scored a goal on me in the first period, and that was it. Like, I had 2 shutout periods. I have no memory.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Man. Now that coach would be up on charges, you know, that the team would be fined and sued, and it was so different though. And even when I played, it was the same thing. I remember getting my bell rung pretty good a couple of times, and I'm not sure if I don't think I was concussed, but you're little days and go back to the bench and how you feel like I'm all right. Like things come back. You're like, all right, get back out there. And it's just the way it was. I'm not saying it's right. I don't think it was right at all, but it was such a different time. So dealing with, on the other side of it, dealing with any kind of mental issues or any kind of thoughts you have in your head, you almost want to bury them because it's not going to be very well accepted for sure.
Well, this is the thing again where the pressure comes in. I had 11 concussions throughout my career.
Wow.
I had another one where I was actually knocked out, came to in the hospital. Coach came in and he said, "You don't have a concussion, you're just faking it." So I was like, yeah, I'll show you. So an hour later, I was out of the hospital, and the next morning I was back on the ice. And because of the changes now, players don't say, "Hey, you know what? I'm not feeling well," despite the fact that they know the consequences it might have. I mean, if it's really severe, you go into your concussion protocol. But what happens in the minor leagues? This is the NHL. What happens in the minor leagues? I'm in a post-concussion study group with 25 NHL players with Baycrest here in Toronto. And, I feel it. Like, I have post-concussion syndrome where I feel nauseous or dizzy, and it's nowhere near as severe as other guys, but it's bad enough.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, if I was in the position again, I would not do it. I would not play. But this is all part of educating, trainers, coaches, doctors, players, that you only have this one life. You have a broken bone that will heal. Your broken brain will not heal.
Yeah.
If you suffer from CTE, you're suffering from CTE. It's not going to go away.
Yeah.
And this is another aspect of the mental game, where we have to say enough is enough. So, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. No, that'll be for part 2, because I think you're right. I think that's something too that, it's I don't want to say it's overdiagnosed, because I don't think that's correct. I think that we should be taking time, especially for young athletes that do get hit and do get any kind of head, bumping or trauma. Like, take time to make sure that you're good. Because the thing with concussions that I've noticed over the years is everybody has symptoms that are different. And, you have sometimes you feel great the next day, and then 2 days later you got headaches and you can't be in, light. And so it comes and goes sometimes. It's very inconsistent from patient to patient or person to person or athlete to athlete. So I think it is important that we do take the right, protocols and procedures to make sure that, the players are returning to play the right way. I think that overall, especially at the professional level, from what I've seen on the back end side, the training staff, does do a way better job now than when I played. I'm sure when you
absolutely.
played at not rushing the return to play, as much as that player is important, and, He's under contract with the NHL team. It's making sure that, and there's obviously other things that go into it with liability and all this other stuff, but it's also, I've seen a lot of players that, sat out for months and rightfully so. It kept coming back. It just kept feeling, they'd have a couple of days that are good and then a day that was bad. Now it's reset again. And, it's frustrating, really frustrating for the player, obviously, frustrating for the organization, no doubt, but it's the right thing to do,
Yeah, absolutely. And, the whole concussion protocol has changed over the years. In the past, it was you have a concussion, you lay flat on your back, dark room, and that's it. But we're rehabbing every injury that we have. Why not concussions? And now there's concussion rehab programs that are helping to recover quicker and safer. So there's been lots of changes, and thank goodness teams take it more seriously and athletes take it more seriously.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, listen, thanks again. And I really appreciate being so open and honest about your career, obviously, and so, your
pleasure.
life. And it's I love sharing that kind of stuff and chatting about, just kind of more broad topics are great, but it's nice to kind of get in the weeds on some of this stuff too. So I really appreciate you being open and honest about everything. It's awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure. I find it super important that people know the story and don't think that everything is peachy throughout a hockey career or any athlete's career. And, we all have a story, we all have a life, and don't be afraid to share it, because the more you share it, the more people learn from it.
Oh, totally. Now, where can people find you if people want to check you out and stuff? I know you've got a kind of a seminar coming up in the next, I think this month as well, but where can people find you, and where's the best spot to connect with you? That's all right. Where's the best?
They can find me on my website. It's www.jenscasten.com. That's JENSCASTEN.com.
Awesome.
And yeah, we do have a presentation on October 21st. It's about mental health and addiction in sports. And for anyone who's interested, you can send me an email to Jens, Jens, at jenscasten.com.
Cool. Awesome. I'll put that in the notes too. And I'm going to,
Thank you.
get this out before the 21st for sure. So that sounds great. But awesome. Best of luck with everything. And we may have to do a part 2 just on concussions and that whole part of the game as well. So
I'd love to. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, thank you very much, buddy.
My pleasure.
All right.
Have a great one.
You too. To kind of raise that bar.
That extra gear, that first 3 steps.
Huge strides in the performance.
That I might not be the player I am today.